All right, this is the section 2.2 pre-video. The actual definition of what a derivative is covered in 2.1. So we'll be doing the limit process to show that in class. But section 2.2 and 2.3 are all about just some general easy rules that shortcut that after you've learned how to do the limits. So I just wanted to do a couple of the really easy ones just to get us a little bit ahead in this section once we hit it. So there's some rules for differentiation, which means taking the derivative of a function. And the two that we're going to focus on that are pretty simple as long as you know it's just a rule that you're following is the constant rule and the power rule. So the constant rule says if my function f of x equals a number, so like f of x equals 2, f of x equals 7, f of x equals 9, that's like y equals a number. So this is a horizontal line. So this is specifically a rule just for horizontal lines. So c is a constant, then the derivative, this is a symbol like I said we'll talk about more in class, but it's called f prime of x. That's the first derivative of a function f of x will equal 0. And what that is that's saying what is the slope of a horizontal line. So the first derivative is always the slope of the line at a specific point. So since the whole line is horizontal, the slope is 0. So to find the derivative of these first two, we need to write, first of all, the symbol for f of x. So when you're doing the derivative, so that'd be f prime of x. And since this is just a constant 5, the derivative would be 0. Same thing here, f prime of x. F of x is a constant, so f prime of x is 0. Another way to write f prime of x is d dx. We'll talk about that in great detail in our session in class. The other pretty simple rule that we can teach without knowing a lot about how the derivatives work yet is something called the power rule. And you'll see this one when we do some of the limits together in class from section 2.1. But this is the shortcut once you've learned how to take the limits. So if your function is an x to a power, so x to the third power, x to the 1/2 power, x to the -5th power, so n is a real number, but it can't be 0 because that would not work when we try to take the power rule. So your derivative, and plus that would just be 1, so it makes it a constant. So as long as your exponent is anything other than 0, then this is the rule for taking the derivative using this shortcut. So it's f prime of x is, notice n is now in front, so the power gets pulled to the front, and then you subtract 1 from the power that was there. So for example, if I have x to the 4th, that's this one, my f prime of x is I pull the 4 to the front as a multiple. I have now x, and then it would be 4 minus 1. And then we would obviously want to work that out. So that's going to be 4x to the 3rd. So that is the derivative of f of x when it equals x to the 4th. So this one's a little trickier. You want to rewrite this first, remembering what an exponent means when it's in the denominator. It can be pulled back up to the top and written as a -3. So that's an algebra review. So this is, first of all, you want to write it this way so you can use the rule since it needs to look like this. So this would be pull the power to the front. So f prime of x is -3 x to the -3 minus 1. So notice this is a negative minus another 1. So it's going to actually look like it's going smaller in the negative numbers. So it's going to -4, not to -2. And then a lot of times we'll have you rewrite this by moving that x to the 4th back down to the bottom so that it looks like the original. So this is the answer for that one. The next one, again, is just an algebra review to see if you remember that x as a square root can be rewritten as x to the 1/2 power. So anytime you have a radical, the exponent on the inside is the numerator. The root value, which if it's not written is a 2, is the denominator. So if you have no f of x or function notation, we just call it y prime. So that's another way of writing f of x if you're just given the letter y. So this would be pull the power to the front, so that's 1/2 x to the 1/2 minus 1. So y prime is 1/2 x to the -1/2 since it's subtracting more than we have. So that would then move to the bottom. So this is 1/2 x to the 1/2 is down in the bottom because the 2 was already in the bottom. And sometimes we'll have you rewrite that with the radical format since that's how they gave it to us. So it's 1/2 times the square root of x. And then this very last one is one that sometimes people mess up just because it's simple, but it looks funny. So this has no power written, which means it's understood to be a 1. So g prime of t would be 1 times t to the 1 minus 1, and that is 1 times t to the 0. But from algebra, we learned that anything to the 0 power is a 1. So this actually ends up just being the coefficient 1. And this was a short video, but I don't want to go too much further since we haven't done the limit portion yet. So once you've watched all the way up to here, this will be every pre-video for the first week of class.